I loved the Super Bowl commercial last year, Love Your Enemies. You hooked us in, you showed us the polarization of our culture, and then that final line, Jesus loved the people we hate. Oh my goodness, that is blisteringly good communication. I see so much good in what you do, and I want you to succeed. So I've got two critiques that I would like you to consider. There are millions of Christians who just need an invitation to church. They don't need yet another message from the cool kids that church is bad or cringe or unnecessary. I want you to help stem the tide of the great de-churching, not add to the mood that causes it. Hi, I'm Glenn from Speak Life. We like to see all things through the lens of Jesus. This is a message to the He Gets Us people. I really hope you see this because I really want you to succeed, genuinely. We love evangelism here. We are an evangelistic ministry. We do digital evangelism. We are small fry compared to your outfit. We're based here in the UK. But we also make videos that try to introduce people to Jesus. And let me tell you a bunch of things that I love about what you are doing. I love that you're putting Jesus front and center in your messaging and that your heart's desire is for the broader culture to see Him afresh. I get up in the morning for that as well. It's so good that this seems to be your heart's desire. And I love that you're trying to connect people to the Bible. They come to your website, they're given helpful scriptural explanations of the stories that they've just seen, and they are encouraged to read the Bible for themselves. The Bible reading plans through YouVersion are a great idea. We do something similar here. And I've heard just before the Super Bowl that you've had 600,000 signups to those Bible reading plans. Great. Getting people connected to the Bible is wonderful, and getting them connected to church is fantastic too. I hear you've got 20,000 churches signed up so that they can hook inquirers into local expressions of the body of Christ. Wonderful. And I've loved a lot of the content too. You strike a brilliantly subversive tone and you show us a surprising Jesus, a Jesus who can make the world sit up and pay attention. One of my favorites from last year was The Rebel. You defamiliarize us with the story of Jesus and represent Him back to us. I thought that was sensational communication. I loved the Super Bowl commercial last year, Love Your Enemies. You hooked us in, you showed us the polarization of our culture, and then that final line, Jesus loved the people we hate. Oh my goodness, that is blisteringly good communication. In 6 words, you convict us all of sin, and suddenly I'm seeing myself as a hater, and you then communicate the love of Jesus that is for haters. You do that in 6 words at the end of just 60 seconds of ad, and that was one of the finest pieces of Christian filmmaking I've seen. Genuinely. I see so much good in what you do, and I want you to succeed, so I've got 2 critiques that I would like you to consider. They are theological critiques, but I think they lie at the heart of the problems that others have identified. You want to present Jesus to the world, but you need to do a better job relating Jesus to God and relating Jesus to the church. When you show them Jesus, you are showing them God. And when you invite them to Jesus, you are inviting them to church. Here's that first point. When you show them Jesus, you're showing them God. Your website used to have this paragraph. Even though you've pulled it, it seems to me that this still shapes a lot of your thinking. We believe Jesus was fully God and fully man. By design, our media messages focus on His humanity since we've learned these resonate with the widest possible audience. We're simply inviting them to explore how might things be different if more people followed His example. Then we extend an open invitation to engage and learn more. We also provide open opportunities for anyone willing to connect with our partners to learn more about Jesus. So you start with an orthodox statement of Christology. He's fully God and fully man, but then you undermine that because in His incarnation, He is both of those things all the time. It's God who was walking around Israel 2,000 years ago, roaming the hood, as you might say, right? According to His human nature, sure, but it's the person of God the Son doing all that He does. God showed up at a wedding in Cana of Galilee. God turned the water into wine. God drove the money changers out of the temple. God stooped down to the disciples' feet to wash them. God did that. It's not that the human bit of Jesus did that and we humans should now copy Him. It's not that if we follow the humanity of Jesus enough, we might see its goodness and be inspired to inquire after the divinity of Jesus. It's God washing those feet. And everything in John 13 is screaming at you, this is what God is like. John explicitly frames this as Jesus showing them the full extent of His love. He tells us that Jesus knew He had come from the Father and was returning to the Father, so He washes their feet. Knowing that He is the eternal Son of the Father, the heir of the cosmos, therefore He serves. This is an expression of deity. This is not simply an expression of humanity at its best. This is what God is like, because Jesus is the eternal Son of the Father, fully God. And because he is fully God, therefore he stoops and serves in order to cleanse us. And such stooping and serving is not a departure from his deity. It is an expression of his deity. That's why pretty much the last words of the preceding chapter and the first words of the following chapter have Jesus telling us, if anyone sees me, they are seeing the Father. So with all eyes on Jesus, we see what he does. And that's God washing those feet. It's God washing those feet. You want an arresting, subversive, disruptive jolt to shock the culture into paying attention? Tell them God visited planet Earth, and he stooped, served, suffered, bled, and died for you. Behold, a fresh vision for God. But my fear with your ads is that you give us a powerful dose of arresting, subversive, disruptive Jesus, brilliant, but then your messaging says, behold, a fresh vision for humanity. And then you cannot help but preach law. Your hands are tied by your theology. You have to then preach to a divided culture that they need to be kinder to each other. And actually, that message doesn't appear to be helping the divide. Law doesn't often help with divides. Jesus tells people, now that I have washed your feet, you go and wash others' feet. There is an order to things. We first need to come to Jesus for a wash and then pass it on. But your messaging isn't that because of your theological divide between the humanity and the divinity. You leave people with the humanity and try and get them to work that up before graduating to the divinity. It doesn't work like that. You come to God for the bath, and then you pass it on to others. If you want the divide to be healed, then you need to preach, God washed our feet, and God needs to wash my feet, and then I pass it on. It's a theological issue. Now, I think it was exactly the right story to tell for the Super Bowl, the foot washing. It's just a superb choice. But I'd love for you to have said, what if God is like this? And at that stage, the framing around your message would not so much be he gets us, but you don't get him, do you? Like, you don't get him. But this is what God is like. So much of my evangelism is basically pointing people to the surprising Jesus of Scripture and saying, is this a God you can believe in? I think that could have been powerful, but it would need a theological rethink on your part. Not dividing the humanity and divinity, but being convinced that when you show them Jesus, you're showing them God. My second critique, I urge you to connect Christ and his church far more in your messaging. When you invite them to Jesus, you are inviting them to church. I think that's theologically crucial. But as soon as you go to the website, this is what you find. How did the story of Jesus, the world's greatest love story, get twisted into a tool to judge, harm, and divide? How do we remind people that the story of Jesus belongs to everyone? These questions are the beating heart of He Gets Us. When you go to the most viewed article, He Gets Us has an agenda, you read exactly the same thing. How did the story of a man who taught and practiced unconditional love, peace, and kindness, who spent his life defending the poor and marginalized, a man who even forgave his killers while they executed him unjustly, whose life inspired a radical movement that is still impacting the world thousands of years later, how did this man's story become associated with hatred and oppression for so many people? And how might we all rediscover the promise of the love his story represents? Those are the questions at the heart of He Gets Us. You say we've done a lot of homework on our culture. We've researched how people feel about each other and what they think about Jesus and Christianity. And that's great. I want to know, where is the homework? I would love to see it. If you have research, can you make it public? Evangelists across the world, and particularly in the United States, would love to see this. Please make it available. Let me tell you about some homework that has been done that is widely available. In the UK, an outfit called Talking Jesus did their homework, surveying thousands in a cross-section of the broader UK population. They found that people were overwhelmingly positive towards individual Christians. Apparently, we are caring, friendly, good-humored, and generous. Far fewer people used negative words like hypocritical, naive, or narrow-minded. Now, caveat, and it's an important one. When Talking Jesus asked the question, what do you feel about the church, as opposed to Christians, there is a marked difference, which is fascinating. People are much more likely to view the church as hypocritical or narrow-minded or homophobic. That's interesting, and I've certainly had the experience of talking to people who make global statements like Christians are hypocrites. And I've asked them, what, all of them? And usually they say, no, not all of them. And then it's not uncommon to find people who start off saying all Christians are hypocrites and who, when asked, cannot think of a single Christian they would describe in that way. That is a really interesting PR problem for the church. But 2 points on that. First, even at the macro level, only a quarter of people think that the church is narrow-minded. 3/4 don't. Only 16% of the UK would even think to call the church homophobic. 84% wouldn't. Are we bending over backwards to change perceptions which the great majority of people do not actually have? And secondly, if you did want to change perceptions about the church, would your campaign help us? He gets us. Your opening message on the website is, how did the story of Jesus, the world's greatest love story, get twisted into a tool to judge, harm, and divide? That is the question that frames the entire website. Would Coca-Cola's advertising agency begin their website saying, how did the sweet, refreshing goodness of Coca-Cola become associated with a drink that rots your teeth? You just wouldn't. So why? I genuinely like so much of your stuff, but why is the frame around everything that institutional Christianity, yuck, Jesus, yay? Now, I understand that evangelistic move. It's a very common move, but it is ultimately misguided and self-defeating. That's a real shame for theological reasons and strategic reasons. Theologically, church is God's mission strategy for the world, and strategically, there are tens of millions of Americans who have been in church in the recent past and who only need an invitation in order to return. Let me tell you about some invaluable homework that people have done in the US. Research for this book, The Great Dechurching by Jim Davis, Michael Graham, and Ryan Burge, reveals that of the 40 million Americans who have left church this century, 30 million of them left for pragmatic reasons. These are the top 3 reasons. I moved, attendance was inconvenient for me, a family change like marriage, remarriage, divorce, or a new child. They left unintentionally, and most who left evangelical churches are willing to return today if you invite them. They would return this Sunday if you invite them. But he gets us. On your website, there's a page entitled, "Is this a campaign to get me to go to church?" And the single word bolded answer is no. That's a fail. Theologically, that's a fail. Strategically, that's a fail. Now, practically, I am so pleased that you guys at He Gets Us do connect people to churches. You hide the word church and just say connect locally, get plugged into a group. But it's churches and church leaders who you are connecting people to. That's great. And you've gotten 20,000 churches to be part of that. Fantastic. But if you feel the need to hide the goodness and the importance of church, maybe your next campaign should be aimed at rehabilitating church in the popular imagination, rather than distancing yourself from church and saying to people, look at Jesus instead. Because here's my most serious critique. When you distance church from Christ, you get de-churching. I'm not saying that that is entirely what He Gets Us does. I'm not saying that's what He Gets Us will lead to, that it will definitely lead to de-churching in the long run. I'm saying that is a grave danger. But I'm saying that if our evangelism distances itself from the church, we shouldn't be surprised if we find people distancing themselves from the church too. If you say, oh yeah, church is the worst. You don't want churchianity, do you? You just want Christianity, right? Forget church, pursue Jesus. If we are ever heard to be saying that, then what do we expect? Except the de-churching of tens of millions of Christians who still say they love Jesus and believe the Bible, but they don't need church. And then they watch a Super Bowl ad that ends by saying, Jesus didn't teach hate, He washed feet. And the impression is readily received, and it's only reinforced by your website. Institutional Christianity does preach hate. And if people get the impression I'm better off sticking with Jesus, then perhaps we shouldn't blame them. We need to see your research, He Gets Us. We need to interrogate your assumptions about who you are trying to reach and how you formed that strategy, because there are millions of Christians who just need an invitation to church. They don't need yet another message from the cool kids that church is bad or cringe or unnecessary. I want you to succeed. I want you to help stem the tide of the great de-churching, not add to the mood that causes it. I want you to lift up Jesus in the arresting ways that you are so good at. But please, relate Jesus to God and relate Jesus to the church. When you show them Jesus, you're showing them God. When you invite people to Jesus, invite them to church. If you want to see how we do digital evangelism here at Speak Life, go to 321course.com and check it out for yourself. But please do like, share, and subscribe so we can see you on the next one. Thanks so much.